Welcome to the Scorpions for Star Citizen podcast. I am your host, SK Unimatrix, or SKU, and today I'm podcasting from a cool but rather sunny day in unincorporated St. Louis County. In this podcast, we're going to be discussing CH Products line of joysticks and other flight sim accessories. In addition, we're going to be discussing some news and information that came out this week about the Dogfighting Alpha module that'll be released hopefully here within probably the next month, and about its multiplayer capabilities, or that lack thereof. And then we're going to get into the discussion a little bit about EVE 2.0 versus Intergalactic Care Bears in space, and kind of my view and take on that whole situation. I have a little bit of a different opinion to where I think both of these mentalities are wrong, and I'll discuss why. So let's get started with CH Products here. CH Products is a company that has been around and building joysticks for a very long time. My first joystick ever was a 2-button CH joystick for use with Microsoft Flight Simulator 1.0. Circa 1985-86, we got our first computer at home in November of 85. It may not have been into January of 86 that I actually got a joystick. I don't really remember, so I'm just going to say circa 85-86. Their product lineup today... Today, they manufacture a lot of joysticks for heavy industrial use, as well as medical use, and previously they've built the joystick for the F-16 flight combat simulators that the Air Forces use, and they currently build the simulator setup for our flight controls for the Predator drone for the Air Force, as far as their actual real military and professional grade stuff. At their consumer level, they still produce joysticks. They produce 3 models of joysticks. They're actually relatively... priced at a decent fair value, I think, for the most part. They range in price from $65 to about $100, maybe a little bit more than $100. And then they also have a throttle as well as rudder pedals. A couple things to keep in mind with their joysticks. Number one, none of them feature twist, which a lot of other consumer joysticks offer these days. They offer a twist function to simulate the rudder so that you can have all 6 axes on one controller. And such as my Logitech Extreme 3D Pro, and there goes a deer out the window. 2 deer, 3 deer. Deer walking by. Okay, sorry. Apologize for that. Also, we have this rolling action that their joysticks have, which is a mechanism that has proven to be very, very accurate over the years. 20 years ago, when they first started making these joysticks, this series of joysticks, they were noted as having some of the most accurate joysticks on the market. That has not changed, but there are also people who do not like that action and prefer the traditional action of a joystick. Myself happens to be one of those included amongst those ranks. That being said, they produce a high-quality product that's going to last a long time. They have a very long history and reputation for doing so. So the first joystick that we're going to review today is the CH Flightstick Pro. Now this joystick is interesting because it essentially remains virtually unchanged as far as basic design goes in 20 years. The first time I ever saw somebody with one of these sticks was about 1993, maybe 1994. One of my friends bought their Flightstick Pro to use with Privateer. We were both playing that game at the time. And the only differences I can see today is that it now has a black base instead of a light gray base, and it has a USB cable instead of a game port cable. Now, I do realize that there are individual model numbers in which they do change internal components. They've redesigned parts of those over the years. You know, that makes sense. But the basic fundamental design has remained unchanged for 20 years. This is an example of it ain't broke, don't fix it. This joystick will set you back about $65. It has an 8-way hat switch, 3 buttons plus a trigger. So it's a 4-button plus 8-way point of view hat joystick. It's also ambidextrous, so if you're looking for a second joystick to use with your offhand, this is one that you can use to do with that. It also has a throttle on it. It's the little wheel on the left-hand side. However, I think it's a very expensive joystick for the amount of features on it. You're essentially at that point buying the rolling motion action as well as the CH brand, well, basically their brand. For $65, I still think that the Logitech Extreme 3D Pro And even the T16 at $30 cheaper is as good of an option, and if not a little bit more flexibility. It has joystick twist, it has more buttons, things of that nature. Additionally, the T16000M at $45 to $50 is still $15 to $20 cheaper, and I think offers just as much precision as the CH Flight Stick Pro. So for the value for the money, I don't think is quite there with this joystick, but it is their entry level to the market. Next up is the CH Combat Stick at $75. This is their middle tier entrance. It is a molded joystick, so it's for right-hander only. It looks much like an F-16 flight control stick. In fact, it's very similar to their top-of-the-line fighter stick, but it's lacking some of the hat controllers that one features. That being said, a lot of people prefer this stick over the fighter stick simply because it does have less hat switches. And for those of you unfamiliar with hat switches, they're multi-directional switches where in the heat of combat, maybe you meant to press up and you press left instead. It actuates some other action that then gets you killed because you dropped your brakes when you meant to, or you dropped your flaps when you meant to, I don't know, raise your gear or something. I don't know. I'm just kind of making stuff up the top of my head. Other than it's just very, very easy to hit the wrong direction in the heat of battle. So if this is going to end up being more of a twitch-based action game where you don't have time to make decisions, that's something to consider. And as a result, a lot of people who maybe aren't into replicating all of the realities of flying a simulator to the nth detail will accept this stick or use this stick over the fighter stick because it does have 6 buttons as opposed to 4, and it still retains 2 multi-directional hat switches. Now it has 6 single action buttons, 1 at the thumb rest, 1 in the lower right hand corner of the head of the stick. Then it has a trigger, and then it has a pinky actuator down at the bottom below the trigger, and then an index actuator on the right-hand side of the trigger. On the actual head of the joystick, you have, of course, the single action button in the lower left-hand corner. There's one in the upper right-hand or upper left-hand corner, and then it features a 8-way hat switch and a 4-way hat switch. So you still get multiple hat switches, which are nice for, say, switching through radar modes as well as looking around if you don't have a tracker or other head tracking gear. But you have definite single action buttons for cycling or pickling weapons or releasing weapons at the trigger, and say another button for certainly releasing chaff or flare or something like that in the lower right hand corner that maybe you don't get with the fighter stick. So there are a lot of people who like the general feel of the stick, like the articulation rolling action of the motion capture, but they want kind of a fewer hat switches so that fewer things go wrong. This is a perfectly acceptable stick, and at $65 or $75 is not that bad of a value. So that brings us to the CH Fighter Stick. This is their top-of-the-line joystick they currently offer, and it has a lot of hat switches. In fact, it has 6 hat switches or multi-directional switches, much like the F-16 stick in real life. In fact, this is modeled after the real-world F-16 stick. It is the go-to joystick for the F-16 Falcon series of flight sims. A lot of people also tend to use it for the DCS Lock-On series. And as such, it is a little bit more of a niche product. There are a lot of people who like having all these hat switches because it gives you something like 176 possible programmable functions just on the stick. And to people who are real flight sim enthusiasts to the nth degree, where they're wanting to replicate almost everything you have in a real-world cockpit, that means something. Whether that's going to mean something for Star Citizen or not, I'm kind of debating. The other downside to this stick is it does have so many hat switches, and if Star Citizen is a more action-packed game, that can lead you to hitting the wrong hat switch or hitting the wrong direction in the hat switch, or maybe it not recognizing the exact input you wanted. Maybe you went to the upper right-hand corner and it read it as an up command. Therefore, it's done the wrong action and you get yourself killed, is the example that I use here. It's really meant for games and combat flight simulators, which has a much slower pace of action. If you go Google, or I should say go to YouTube and search for Falcon BMS multiplayer, look at the Israeli strike mission. There's a couple others out there too that I'll be linking to in this video. Go watch these missions. You'll notice that for the most part, they are much slower paces of action. There can be minutes before you decide to actually fire a missile. And those type of things, you're dealing with deliberate actions, and having that many options available is nice to have. As a result, that's the reason why many people choose the combat stick for general flight simulator gaming over the fighter stick. And a lot of that just has to do with personal experience. If you are new to joysticks, do not go out and buy the fighter stick. I think you're going to be overwhelmed. I think you would be much better served with the combat stick over the fighter stick. In fact, you may even be better served with a T16000M or Logitech 3D Pro as opposed to a $100 joystick. Now, at the same time, there are people who will say, well, this isn't the best joystick out in the market. That's the A10 Warthog, because it carries a $300 price tag. Maybe, maybe not. But the A10 Warthog has the problem of it's really designed to be used with DCS's A10 simulator, combat simulator. You can use it for other extensive flight simulator games, but it's really geared towards that particular game, much the same way as the older CH F16, their top-of-the-line stick that rivaled the Warthog in terms of price goes, that also carried the USAF certification. It had that same problem. It was designed for Falcon BMS, or Falcon 4, and it didn't always serve as well in other games. It could be made to work with other DCS games, but if you were using it in a non-flight combat or non-flight game, you probably had more buttons than you really knew what to do with. And oddly enough, the older F16 flight stick that CH Products made was basically a more expensive version of the fighter stick, essentially. The other reason why I like the fighter stick over the A10 Warthog stick has to do with the way that the bases are made. The A10 really needs to be actually physically mounted to something hard and stable. So, like, you want to drill it. It has actually not pilot holes, but little places where it's meant to screw down into a block of wood, some sort of steel carrying rig that you can build, or to the top of a desk. Well, I know I just bought a new desk. I don't want to be going to drilling holes into a $500 desk. Thank you very much. So that's also, the A10 stick tends to be very, very stiff, which some people like. I hate. Personal preference there. And finally, for just the Warthog stick, it's $300. For $300, you can have the stick, the throttle, and the rudder pedals from CH. So something to keep in mind. And speaking of the throttle and pedals, let's talk about it. First, let's just talk about the pedals real quick. Now, none of CH Products offered joystick or twist on the joysticks. Their opinion is we're serving the flight simulator enthusiast market. If you want to manipulate the yaw axis, buy a set of rudder pedals. That's their solution, not including it on their stick. So, they have rudder pedals. It's one of only 2 mass-market rudder pedals available. The other one's from Saytech. We'll discuss it next week when we discuss their product lineup. And they're very basic pedals. They work. They've been known to work for a long time. They have a heavy steel base. They're good as far as all that goes. I'm not going to be buying rudder pedals, as a question on our comments section on YouTube last week asked. The simple reason being, I've never used them. I know that sounds kind of silly, considering I've said that I was a hardcore flight sim junkie. I was. But my X45 set offered flapper control on the throttle to mimic rudder pedal, and I used that, or I've used twist and joystick. I've been perfectly happy with either of those. And plus, I like to have a space heater at my feet in the wintertime, which may or may not be recommended with rudder pedals and other electronics. So that's my kind of 2 cents about that. Now I want to talk a little bit about their CH Pro throttle. This is a very unique product because it's the only HOTAS throttle you can actually buy separate from being in a combination pack. Meaning, in every other HOTAS setup, you have to buy the throttle and the joystick together. With CH Products, you can buy the throttle and place it with any other joystick on the market. I may end up doing this. I've said before, I plan to try a 2-joystick setup. If I am not happy with my ability to perform in dogfighting maneuvers with that setup, I am going to add the CH Pro throttle with my Wingman 3D Extreme or Logitech Extreme 3D Pro joystick. This may not happen until January. Hopefully there's some left on the market. Apparently Star Citizen is draining the marketplace of joysticks rapidly. In fact, I think the A10 Warthog from Thrustmaster is on back order until April or May now. So, think Star Citizen's not having an impact on peripheral market? Well, they're drawing up joystick sales. And Satek's coming out with a new joystick, a replacement for their X52 Pro and X65 series here in time for the holidays. So I'll be discussing all that next week. So I'm not going to really go much into the throttle because it's on the retail market, it's your only option if you're not going to buy a HOTAS package. So it's $100. It's a decent throttle. It has a lot of buttons and keys and stuff on it. I will let you look it up here and find out more about it. But if you're looking to do a HOTAS setup without having to buy a set, this is your throttle. And leave it at that. So that kind of ends our product review segment. And now we will be getting into known knowns. Let's hit it there, Donald.
There are known knowns. There are things we know we know. We also know there are known unknowns. That is to say, we know there are some things we do not know. But there are also unknown unknowns. The ones we don't know, we don't know.
Okay, let's discuss about some of the known knowns here. Now, originally I was going to get more into the EVE 2.0 versus Intergalactic Care Bears mentality that a lot of people in the forums of this game currently have. But something came out this week with the Rock Paper Shotgun interview when he was talking about how the dogfighting module may be initially single-player only and not multiplayer. And I think this is generally a good thing because of my experience with trying to get people to play Diaspora, which is a space combat simulator based on Free Space 2. It's set in the Battlestar Galactica universe. And it's probably the best analog I've seen so far of how multiplayer may work in terms of flight physics and stuff like that. It's not perfect, but it's fairly, I think, spot on for those wanting to practice. And this is something we'll talk about more next week. But anyway, my experience with that is a lot of people were signing up and pledging for Star Citizen who saw MMO and automatically assumed MMORPG. And I was like, wait a minute. This is not an RPG game. And they're like, well, what do you mean by that? And I don't know what you mean. Like, this is a space combat game. And there's a deer again staring at me through the window. And another deer. Where's the other deer? There's no other deer. Sorry. I apologize if I keep getting distracted by the deer outside the window, but they're there. The benefits of living in unincorporated St. Louis County. At any rate, where was I? So this is a space combat game. Space combat simulation game. Flight combat game. It's not going to be like Star Conflict. It's not going to be like Freelancer. It's going to be like Wing Commander, Privateer, Free Space, XVT, those genre of games. The games I grew up playing. Oh, well, I've never played games like that. Well, probably haven't because they haven't been around too much in the past 10 years. We're going to be talking about a game that's going to be on the level of detail as a Falcon BMS or a DCS, a Digital Combat Simulations game, or an ARMA or something of those natures. Probably not. We're going to lean more toward game, more like Free Space 2 than Falcon 4 BMS. Certainly. I doubt you're going to have a 30-minute pre-flight check routine that you have to do before you can even load up and play the game. At the same time, I don't see this as being a game that you can log into and play for 15 minutes and then log out. I think you're going to need a solid hour or two to dedicate to when you do play it, log on to play it, to fly and do what you need to do. So as such, I started having people download Diaspora, which is that BSGO game, or BSG game, mod of the Free Space 2 game, and got them into multiplayer, and then would promptly kick their ass about 15 to 0 usually, in 5 minutes. And that would open up their eyes. Granted, now they had to go in and learn the in and out of the game by flying the tutorial missions and the single-player campaign. And the next comment I heard inevitably, oh my god, there's so many keys I've got to learn. Is Star Citizen going to be like this? And I'm like, yep, that part of it is going to be there. This is not going to be an easy mode game, guys. This is going to be a big boy pants game. That means a lot of keybinds and a lot of things. It's just not going to be, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, Control 1, Control 2, Control 3, Control 4, Alt 1, Alt 2, Alt 3, Alt 4, etc., etc., etc. There are going to be a lot more keybinds. And you're going to need to know a lot of them to be effective in combat, or have a HOTAS set up where you have access to all those commands however you want on your joystick and throttle. That's the game they're going for. And people are like, oh my gosh, I've never seen a game this complex and stuff before. I'm like, it's not really simple. There's really about 15, 20 key commands, and then the rest of them you don't really need to know. In fact, there's a lot of them in there that Diaspora doesn't apply to, because there's no shields or anything like that in Diaspora. So you don't have to worry about managing shield energy or weapons, or because it's kinetic weapons and you have finite amounts. You don't have to worry about shield and energy management, essentially. You will have to worry about that in Star Citizen. Alternately, I recommend downloading Wing Commander Saga, which is another free game built on the FreeSpace 2 engine that's set in the Wing Commander universe. I think that game is even closer to what the Star Citizen will be like. The major difference there being there's no multiplayer component to it. So it doesn't really serve for very well of learning to fly together and things of that nature. So anyway, I had him download and install those games, and instantly it was those two combinations I've heard of. Oh my god, I can't play this with keyboard and mouse. I need a controller or a joystick, and oh my god, there's so many buttons. So I think by having the single player, or having it be single player only coming out, is a very wise idea, because it's going to give, I think, an initial break-in period and a rude awakening for a great number of particularly younger gamers.